Good afternoon, everybody. Hello and welcome to this professional development webinar brought to you by the Fashion Network in partnership with the Ecommerce Club. I say good afternoon. It's good afternoon here in the UK where we're broadcasting from, but obviously we've got panels from all over the world. So just a little bit about this session. We will be covering the topic of the joys of replatforming. And I say that with a hint of sarcasm. For those that have been through the process, they might understand where I'm coming from. The specifics of today's panel, though, we will be looking at when and why you should be replatforming. We'll be discussing the challenges of legacy systems, the different platforms available and the pluses and minuses of them. And if we have time, we'll be talking about replatforming's biggest fails, costs, and integrations. So that's the agenda for today. Just a few things to note at the beginning. If you have any questions or comments, then please leave them in the chat box. This isn't a podcast, this is a webinar, and we want to try and keep this as interactive as possible. So do get involved. Like I say, questions and comments, we'll do our best to answer and acknowledge as many of them. If you are a little bit like me and you prefer to speak rather than type, then you can use a little tool here in the Zoom webinar feature, which is a raise a hand tool. You click on that and it'll notify us that you would like to speak to us, and then we can switch your audio on and you can talk to our panelists directly. Don't worry about it, we can't switch your video on, but we can, if you request to turn your audio on, we can switch that on and you can chat to us. This session will be recorded for anyone that is speaking to us, just so you know, and it will be published on the Fashion Network's YouTube channel at a later date, just in case you want to share it with any friends or colleagues or bosses. So if you are registered, well, you are registered if you're in here, we will send an email around to everybody with a link to the YouTube channel after this session is done. Also, immediately after this session at 3 o'clock GMT, we'll have a quick 15 to 20 minutes of networking session. So if you want to join us, my colleague Scarlett, who's in the background, will share a link during this talk to come and join us. Whereas you're at the moment, you're in a webinar, a Zoom webinar, that little session will be a Zoom meeting. So if you want to come and join us and you might get a chance to meet the panelists, you can meet myself, my colleague here from the Fashion Network and the Ecommerce Club. And also you might get to meet some fellow delegates. So that will be happening immediately after this session. And it will only take place for about 15 to 20 minutes tops. It'll just be a quick virtual networking, if you like. Before we begin, though, we would like you guys listening in to make use of the chat box. And we would be delighted if you can let us know in the chat box where you're from in the world. Let us know the job role that you do and the company that you do it for. So let us know where you're from in the world, job role you do, and obviously if you want to give your company a shout out, pop that in there to give our panelists an idea of who's listening to. If you happen to be a student or anything like that, then just let us know what you're studying and where you're studying. So yeah, pop that into the chat box so we can have a look. And before we get into the panel discussion, I'd just like to give a shout out to our two sponsors today. So we have two sponsors, and the first one is BetterCommerce. BetterCommerce offers headless and composable solutions to mid-market retailers. In particular, they specialize in areas such as PIM, e-commerce development. They specialize in experience, OMS, engagement, and analytics. And when we say engagement, we're talking about an AI and personalization engine that they have developed. So that's BetterCommerce. Alongside BetterCommerce, we have our other partner, which is the Commerce team. And I guess that's what it says on the tin there, really. The Commerce team are a team of highly experienced e-commerce experts delivering e-commerce platform implementation, development, consultancy, and support. So a huge thanks for both of those businesses for sponsoring today's session. This allows us to be able to deliver these learning events to you guys without any cost. So if anybody listening in are in the market for any sort of e-commerce development or integration, then I'm sure these guys would be delighted to hear from you. The contact details will be on the slides. It'll also be on the email that was sent around afterwards. or you can contact the Fashion Network or the e-commerce team, and we'll be more than happy to introduce you to both of these businesses. You will be meeting two experts from both these businesses shortly. Before I introduce those, I'm going to introduce myself though. My name is Dale Hicks, and I am the co-founder and director of the Fashion Network, and I will be chairing today's session. Joining me, we have Vikram Saxena. He is the CEO at BetterCommerce. Now, Vikram is a self-confessed, now wait for it, techpreneur. And if that word doesn't exist in the Oxford English Dictionary, I think it should for people like him. Vikram has been building software for around 24 years and still actually gets his hands dirty with the coding aspect of development. Outside of work, Vikram loves street food, a man after my own heart, and he's trying to play and learn golf at the moment. He tells me it's quite a difficult game. I thought it was just waving a stick around myself, but I might be wrong. I might be wrong in that. And outside of that, he also has dabbled in a bit of filmmaking, but really his passion is developing and coding. So that's Vikram. Alongside Vikram, we have Paul Sanderson. Now, Paul is a director at the commerce team. Paul is an e-commerce specialist, and he's sort of more of a holistic specialist with experience across all aspects of e-commerce. And he's worked for both small and large organizations. Paul describes himself as living and breathing e-commerce and has about 15 years experience both in retail and on the agency side of things. Outside of his work, Paul is a follower of most sports and is particularly looking forward to watching his beloved Liverpool at Anfield. I shall say no more on that point. Anyway, we have David Worby, who's co-founder of PROSPERO. He'll be joining us. David's an independent consultant. He's not attached to today's sponsors. David is a multi-channel advisor and consultant with over 30 years hands-on experience as both CEO and CCO within retail businesses. David describes himself as a digital native and has considerable experience, particularly within the UK retail and branded sector. Outside of work, David is a huge cricket fan and is also a Reading Football Club fan, but is also, and he's also recently become a granddad. So congratulations there for you, David. Thank you very much. I've got one quick question before we proceed into, and I'm going to just come to you, Paul, quickly. So obviously, both businesses do similar but different stuff. Paul, can you just sum up the difference between the commerce team and BetterCommerce?
Absolutely. So hi to everybody. Thanks for taking the time out today. So just to explain the difference between BetterCommerce and the commerce team. So BetterCommerce are a platform solution, a platform technology, and basically the commerce team are I suppose the conduit between yourselves and the technology. So we basically come on board, we understand the integration, and basically plumb all the I suppose various technologies together and make them work. I think to put it very simply, we make your systems connect to each other and provide the right experience for your customer.
Thanks, Paul. And you were saying that Vikram, you so with Paul is, I suppose, you could like him as being a bit of a plumber. Vikram, you actually develop tech and you have your own tech. Do you want to just explain?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So we build our own tech from ground zero, and we built the whole platform from ground zero. And we offer that. We also do implementations for customers, but mostly we are looking to do that with the partners as well. And potentially, if we look at partners, the commerce team would potentially become a partner in that sense as well.
Okay.
Do that implementation for the customer.
So you build the stuff and Paul plumbs the stuff in.
Yes.
A loose description, if you like.
That's correct. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll crack on with the panel. But before we do, we have a poll that we would like to just publish. We would like to get the audience to answer this poll. So here we go. So the poll is, do you know what headless commerce is? So the answers are pretty similar. It's either yes or no. So we're going to allow you a few moments to do that. So just yes or no, do you know what headless commerce is? And we'll publish that poll shortly. While you're doing that, I'm just going to have a quick shout out to see who's in the audience. So we have a clothing business here from Turkey, Servet, welcome. Thank you very much for attending. Hello, Emmanuel, dialing in from Nigeria. It's a sustainable fashion brand. Who else have we got here? We have Stuart here from Heathrow. Welcome, Stuart. And if you in the audience want to have a look through in the chat box, you can have an idea who else is in today's session. So the poll should be going live. Here we go. So the answer is 75% of our audience say no, they don't know what headless commerce is, and 25 say yes. So Vikram, I'm just going to come to you. Does that come at a surprise to you?
Not really, Dale, to be honest. I think it's a headless. If you look at it, it's more of a technology word rather than a business-oriented terminology. So it needs a lot of education, and it does require. From a business perspective, I think when you are looking at a business as a business owner or as the one who's driving the business, it really doesn't matter at the end. What you care about is growing the business. And that's what it should be about, essentially. Headless and all these are just one of the means to get there. And they all have their own pros and cons, different evolution. So it's absolutely fine. I'm not very surprised with that, actually.
What about you, Paul? Does that come as a surprise to you?
No, I'd probably agree with Vikram, really. I think headless, even though the term has been around in the technology sector for probably coming up to 10 years, I think in terms of the understanding of headless, it's been quite limited. And there's many different flavors of headless as well. And ultimately, it's integration of multiple systems to ultimately create the customer experience. So the commerce team work across headless and SaaS-based platforms. And as Vikram says, there's very much pros and cons to each solution. It's looking at which one suits your business the best at your stage and your maturity levels as well.
So we've got quite a lot to go through today. We've got quite a lot of discussion points. So we're going to be looking at shortly why and when you should re-platform. We'll be looking at the challenges of the legacy systems. We're going to be talking about the different platforms available and the pluses and minuses of them as well. But I'm just going to come to David first. Can I just get your thoughts on, because David, am I right in thinking you were at My Wardrobe some time ago?
Yes, in a different life I was the CEO of My Wardrobe, yes. Absolutely.
So can I get your perspective on when and why you should re-platform?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I would say, and hi everybody, thanks for your time. My perspective on re-platforming is it becomes necessary, and it becomes absolutely necessary at certain points in your life. But equally, it becomes desirable as well. And I think understanding when it's an imperative versus when it's a kind of preference is pretty important. You know, in my business, I kind of work with brands and retailers who variously have a passion or a complete distrust of replatforming. There are those that kind of believe it's something you do very regularly in order to keep pace with change. And there are those that do it only absolutely begrudgingly because they know that if done badly, it can be traumatic for businesses to go through it, not just financially, but in other ways as well. So I think one of the things that I try to help people do is understand the rationale behind what they're trying to do. Is it that they can't scale? Is it that they need to change their operating model? Is it that their costs are too high and they need to bring them down? What is it? Blend that with a kind of understanding of, are you trying to become a technology business, or actually do you just need to partner with outstanding people who can bring that technology so you can focus on the business side? And I think getting under the skin of that determines the imperative or otherwise for a journey towards a replatforming.
Paul, I'm going to bring you in on that question then. So just tell us a little bit from your perspective why and when you should be considering replatforming.
I'd certainly agree with David's comments around changing platform to keep pace. There's understanding that your technology stack doesn't deliver the experience for the customer any longer. And then there's the unfortunate situation where something's failed, where you've got no option. And I think certainly the sort of primary reason is understanding how to provide the right customer experience is certainly the preferred, rather than trying to save a business. But there's many different ways of looking at it. I think in terms of whether you're trying to achieve growth is one, whether you're trying to protect your business, ultimately save your business is another. As we all move towards the digital dependency, it can't be you need very, very strong leadership about how to keep pace and understand, I'll go back to the word I used before, the maturity levels as well, because different solutions are applicable for different businesses depending on which part of the cycle they're in. So, I think it's there's always different circumstances for each business, but I think the customer comes first, and how do you satisfy the customer should be the primary aim.
And has there ever been an occasion where you've actually said to a client, for example, don't think you're ready to replatform just at the moment? And if so, what was the reason for it?
There's a couple of points around that. I think there's, yes, you're not ready to replatform because the technology's there. And of course, the people around the table here will say, yeah, we can do it at any point, but a business needs to be ready to replatform as well. I think it can be too often thought that the technology answers all the problems and gives you all the answers, but you need to be ready as a business. You need to have the right skill set available. You need to have the resource available to deliver and really secure the, I suppose, a successful project. I think in terms of the business needs to be ready, and then I keep going back to this point of customer first, is understanding why you want to replatform, where are the shortfalls in terms of your current system, current technology stack, and where can those gaps be filled and plugged to take you to that next level in terms of your growth and maturity.
Vikram, what's your perspective on this? So hearing the other two speakers speak, is it not obvious when you need to, replatform? Or?
Yeah, you put me in a very sticky situation. Both of them have covered pretty much all the aspects that need to be covered, essentially. But yeah, I think I would completely agree with the points that they've raised. Primarily, you look at it, whether you are doing too much of manual work in serving your customers. Despite having a good website, you're essentially doing a lot of manual work. At that point in time, you see, okay, what is the cost that I'm putting in for manual work, and can I automate that? Can I somehow bring it into my digital platform itself? So that could potentially be one trigger. You're planning to go international, let's say, at this point, and that, again, your existing stack does not serve that purpose. And that's when probably you will look at, okay, what are the platforms which support that internationalization for me or make things easier for me? So improving efficiencies, going international, growth, saving cost, total cost of ownership is just going bonkers. So let's say just to meet your peak traffic, you're essentially just upscaling your servers all the time. Okay. Or your site keeps going down pretty much every day whenever the inventory sinks. So now these are the challenges, these constant, you don't replatform for headaches. You replatform when you've got migraines. So when you identify your migraines, that's when you start looking for replatforming, either migraines or a really good scaling growth. Those are the primary triggers, I would say, to drive that decision.
Efficiencies, growth, going international, yes. Those sorts of things. And Paul mentioned a little bit there about making sure you have the right resources. Now, this is a question to anyone really. Are we talking about human resources here, Paul, or I can maybe put this towards you actually, David? I mean, when you have done this in the past, or when you've been in-house, have there been any examples where perhaps you haven't had the right resources? And if you were to do this again with a client, what resources would you need to make sure you have in place before you embark on this?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because we all know that there are businesses out there who, when they stare at this challenge, think this is a 99% technology challenge. And I would argue that it isn't. At least in the first part of the journey that you go on, it's almost got nothing to do with technology. This is a business decision. It's governed by business rules and customer requirements. And understanding that and being able to surface those such that you understand what the prize looks like is only supported by technology. It's a business decision. And we've all doubtless got lots of experience of businesses who've kind of just thought, right, well, this is an IT project. It's over to the technology team. It's over to the head of IT or the CIO or wherever he is to go off and do it. And it isn't. The journey has to start with the business resources mobilizing themselves to paint a picture of what they're actually trying to achieve. And it's only once that process has gone through a number of iterations do you really begin to share it with the technology vendors and suppliers and services that could ultimately meet it? And I'm sure at some point in the journey today, we'll talk about failed programs. In my experience, failed programs often start because that foundational understanding piece isn't put into place early enough.
You're saying
So
you don't want to be
resources.
You don't want to be sat around a table with a Paul or a Vikram making business decisions at that stage, is what you're saying, effectively.
Yeah, you don't want to make them on the fly. You want to paint a really good picture right at the start of your journey about what you want this to deliver, because it's going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to cost you sleepless nights. It's going to cost you a lot of effort to get to the end game. And you need to be very cognizant of what success looks like when you get there. Because we all know that these projects have a life of their own. They morph, they creep, things get added in, things get taken out, things change. If you don't start with a solid foundation of when we're done and what we've achieved, it'll be one of those never-ending projects.
And do you agree with them? I can see some nodding going on the other half of the screen, so it seems like you guys agree with that. But do you agree with what Vikram was saying in terms of trigger points with efficiencies, global expansion, growth? Is there anything else you'd want to add to those trigger points?
There's a subtle add to what Vikram said, which is that there are, apart from the fact that there are lots of businesses today with maybe more monolithic as opposed to headless architecture, but monolithic architecture that's kind of going out of life. These guys are on burning platforms. These things will die. Paul and Vikram will work like crazy to support them and keep them going, or their equivalent suppliers will. But the reality is those things need to change. So in a scenario where we're on a burning platform, kind of the rules are slightly different. But there is a subset of requirements that sits for me around wanting to keep ahead of the pace of change. There are businesses who I think want to put agility and the ability to meet a very accelerated customer requirement ahead of the market. And those are the people that see change as a constant. Those are the people that need to always be ahead. I'm working with a client right now whose customers are between kind of 18 and 22. Those customers are kind of fickle. They just change in an instant. What they look at and how they respond to it is different. And that business needs to be constantly renewing itself and constantly refreshing itself, and technology is one of the ways of doing it. Funny enough, I've had personal experiences of this, of pretty much everything you've advised. All three of you really have not taken that advice, so I do have personal experience of this myself. But you did touch on something there about old technology and stuff, and that moves seamlessly on to my next question, which is about legacy systems. And I'm going to bring Paul in on this. You talked to us a little bit about sort of dealing with those sort of what the challenges of legacy systems, how best to approach that, because for some businesses they may not want to change their old systems, some might not afford to be able to change their systems. Can you talk a little bit more about that, how to navigate that?
Yeah, there's a few flavors there really, Dale. So there's the old systems, I think, as David quite rightly points out, are coming to end of life and no longer will exist. There's systems that are failing to meet the customer needs or grow with the business. And then fundamentally, what do you do about replacing them with new technology? Because I think, just being very honest, we all get used to how things work and make things work sometimes outside of the capabilities of the technology. So there's many different flavors there, and we've sort of witnessed the majority of them. And I think with any project, you want to reduce risk. So implementing an e-commerce platform, whether it's small or large scale, that's one moving part. Okay, so you've got a pretty strong idea, as David says, you've got a good foundation. You're quite assured there, but always be careful about changing too many parts at the same time, because then it's a project that never ends. So I think understanding where the changes need to happen, understanding how the business can cope with those changes as well, because that's another key part of this. It is a people business. It is a people industry. If the change is going to impact different facets of a business, they need to be geared up for that change. And everybody thinks of a website as being the customer facing, but actually the impact it has on the people and the resources is enormous. So to avoid such a long sustained change program is understand a journey in terms of what are the key things to start with, what can follow, and where do you move for the future? Because if that's not in place, then we'll go to the fails later, but that is one of the common areas, trying to bite off too big a project. And if any project lasts over 6 months, generally the technology will be struggling to keep pace because it's already 6 months old before you've even launched it. So there's so many flavors, but it always makes for interesting work. I will say that, and it's as Vikram will say, from a technology sort of implement a tech perspective, anything can work, but it just depends how finely tuned you want the car.
So I want to let me bring Vikram in on this stage. And do you agree with that, what Paul's just said, Vikram, or do you take the position as a technologist? Let's start from scratch and build it all from scratch. Or, you know, I know you do a little bit of working with legacy tech yourself. I spoke to your colleague the other day about this, but what's your take on it? Do you agree with what Paul says, or would you just prefer to build from scratch from the beginning?
Building from scratch is going to lead you into one big black hole and a project that will probably never end. So that's definitely never a good strategy to start with. You always look at, like I said, identify the migraines and potentially, go through that analysis, which is typically called, a Moscow analysis. So when you put down your requirements, this is what we want, let's say 6 months down the line, this is what we want our business to look like. Now, in that vision, what are the most essential elements that you want to achieve in that 6 months duration? Because yes, technology can do pretty much a lot of things, but there's always a trade-off. And that trade-off could be in terms of quality, in terms of speed, in terms of cost, and in terms of human power resources as well, which are going to be part of the project. At the end of the day, without the quality put into the work, it's not going to produce the result that you expect. So you have to balance it all out and prioritize it the way you want it to be, and then move one step at a time rather than doing a big bang, unless until you've got millions of bucks to throw it all away. I would never suggest that start everything from scratch. I never go with that approach at all. Look at what can we reuse, what parts do we change at this stage, what parts do we change later, where is our migraine? Let's solve the migraine first and then move on to the headaches gradually.
So it's kind of almost the inverse of picking the lowest hanging fruit, really, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting we use the terms migrate and headache. I'm not sure what that says about this whole topic as a whole.
Yeah, for migraines, you would go to a doctor. For headache, you would probably not go to a doctor.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point, actually. So let's move on then. The next question I want to ask is just sort of like different types of platforms that are available and sort of the pluses and minuses of that. And I'd like to bring you back in. I'd like to bring David back in on this. So David, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences? We did a poll leading up to this event about what platform do you use, and right at the moment, Shopify is coming out right at the top, which is like, it's just one of many platforms. Do you want to talk us a little bit about sort of the different platforms, David?
Yeah, sure. I tend to start at the level above platform. So in my head, there's kind of three ways of looking at the platforming option. There are three routes you can take. The first route is to decide as a business that you actually don't really want to get too involved in this. You want to outsource it all. So if you don't want to put any kind of technology at the center of your business and you just want a partnership that gets your brand online, as many emerging new brands, businesses do, you can partner with someone who will take all that pain away. So examples would be people like Amazon, in the UK, the Hut Group, or the Next business. There are a variety of businesses who effectively will import your stock, agree with you price lists, and manage the whole of the customer interface, manage the whole of the relationship with the customer, and indeed in some cases be the business of record in terms of the relationship with the customer. So there's that whole group of, I don't want to be bothered, I just want to outsource all of that to someone else, I want no pain. The second camp is, no, I do want technology to be able to sit in my business and I do want it to be part of it. And in that case, you've got two options. You can either go down the traditional monolith route, which is the way we all grew up, 20 years ago, buying a stack that effectively does the customer experience at the top and does all the back of house grunt work below. And there are many different types of monolith. You've mentioned Shopify. and for every one, read another 100, because there's quite frankly too many to spend too much time on. But there's a massive amount. And the third camp is, actually, we want to use technology because actually we want technology to be at the heart of our business. And those kind of businesses, particularly if they're of the larger scale, the enterprise scale, might consider a headless world. The benefit of a headless world being that it's effectively a constantly moving best of breed world, where you're constantly replacing components with better components or more appropriate components. You have a higher level of agility because it's not baked into a stack. It's a whole load of ecosystem solutions that are connected through APIs that effectively can be very easily removed and replaced with the very latest thing. So the analogy I often use with that is, if your CEO wakes up on a Monday morning and decides that actually TikTok is the next thing, or video conferencing with your customers is the next thing, you could have put a component in a few days, and a week later you could be actually taking the benefit of that through a headless world. To do that in a monolith world, much more complex, much more difficult to do, and probably quite a lot more expensive.
Your
I think there's kind of three camps, and before you jump into saying, is it Shopify, or is it SAP, or is it whatever it is, or BigCommerce or something else, I think you just have to consider, how does the nature of your business map to those three camps? And which would you exclude, and therefore which would you include?
Okay. And obviously there'll be cost implications and on all of that, which we'll come on to in a bit anyway. Just interesting, you talked about video conferencing. We've actually done a masterclass, which you can find on the YouTube channel, about live commerce. So if anyone that's picked in, so there's a recording out on YouTube channel about live commerce there. Paul, do you want to pick up on any of those points in terms, because obviously you're in the business of plumbing there.
I think there's definitely three camps there, and I think it goes back to the business objective. Is it to grow? Is it to protect market share? Is it to launch a new product? And there's different solutions for different elements, and they all do have a place within the market. And I think this is a key factor: is there's not one solution that fits all. They all have a place within the market. It just depends which suits your business the most. As I said, there's pros and cons to each solution. There's cost implications, it really is down to anybody can pick 101 different solutions, but not one will be perfect. But does it answer for what you need at this present time? Yes. Will it answer what you need in 6 months' time? Who knows? Nobody saw the pandemic come along. So in terms of, I suppose, as a business, if you're agile enough to be able to make decisions, make changes, and be as prepared as possible, then that puts you in a very strong position. But you've got to be a business that accepts change will happen, and you can't sit on the same technology solution for too long. There's no longer a 5-year plan around technology.
And Vikram, obviously your solutions, you've got solutions that you've developed yourself, but you do work with other solutions as well, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not that. Cool. So my next point then is sort of like replatforming fails, and I'm going to come to you first on this, Vikram. We've got any case studies about things in the past where things have not gone very well? Because often not, when we talk about these sorts of things, this is where some of the best learnings are to be had. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning from that, in terms of fail is, I'll just touch upon what David said, looking at it from the context of your business and your objective. If it is not fully aligned, let's say you set it up, you define it as this is an IT project, and business guys are sitting aside, they don't care, it's an IT project, it's their headache. It's not. You have to start looking at it. It's not a supplementary or a complementary function anymore. IT is not. It has to become the heart of the business. Unless and until you do that, it's not going to be successful, because IT is going to do things in a certain way without understanding the complete implications or the business goals. And the devil lies in the details. And this happens quite a lot. IT people think a little bit differently than the business goals or the business people. And if that connect and that alignment is not there, then it is bound to fail. no matter how much money or resources or time you put into it. And this, I've seen it a few times in the past. So, and one more thing that I would just add is context is king. Like David said, look at it from your business perspective. So context is king, not content. What may have worked for somebody else may not necessarily work with you. Just trying to copy the solution from another business may not necessarily fit your maturity level or appetite in terms of technology or in terms of processes or in terms of the overall culture. So you have to understand all of it from your context and then evaluate the solution or the platform against your use cases and define your objectives and align it accordingly. If you don't do that, I think there are obviously a lot of checklists and a lot of things that you can evaluate anything on, but biggest of them, I think this is the biggest one, which could lead to disastrous replatforming projects.
Okay. Just a quick shout out to the audience here. If you guys have got any questions as well, just pop them in the chat box or raise your hand and, we'll get those answered for you. So yeah, let us know your questions, guys. I just wanted to pick up on the point. This can go to anyone really. So obviously you're talking about making this core part of your business, which resonates with me as someone who's worked in marketing, because I always say that's the same thing about marketing. Make that your core thing in your business. Don't just farm it out to the marketing department and crack on with it. So obviously different businesses have different requirements. Now, some people might be listening to this and thinking, obviously, selling online e-commerce has got to be the number one thing for all businesses, isn't it? But we work with a lot of businesses here at the Fashion Network that are perhaps wholesale-led businesses. And then the e-commerce aspect is kind of a little bit of a secondary thing. I'm not sure who this can go to, but I mean, if they are that sort of business, would the best thing to be do, maybe this is David perhaps, would the best thing to be do to partner with someone initially, and then when the e-com side of the business grows and grows, then you go over to Vikram to develop it? Would you suggest, David, or?
Well, I mean, to give you an interesting case study, I was talking to a potentially new client this morning who has three businesses actually that were completely offline 3 years ago. And they operated through showrooms and through galleries spread across the UK. And when COVID hit, they realized they had to change their model. So what they did is they decided, without too much thinking about it, to recruit a load of developers and build their own world. And that's what they did. And now 2 years later, they, not surprisingly, need to rip it up and start again. So the reality is that the need for change and the expediency of that need can change the way in which you tackle those kind of challenges. But if you're a business that doesn't have any inherent technology capability, it does seem a little odd to me to all of a sudden assume that you might be able to do it if you just recruit a few people. So I think you have to really ask yourself whether developing technology is something you want to put pretty close to the center of your business. And if you do, that's great. You'll do it and you'll build a world around that. But equally, if you don't, be honest about it. And the sensible thing to do is to find some partners who can come in and do it for you. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't value technology. It just means that you enable it in a different way. The most expedient way for you in that scenario is to find a partner who you will pay to provide a service to you. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't regard it as valuable. Quite the contrary. It means you think it's actually valuable enough to be trusted to somebody else who you will pay to provide that service. So I don't think you should see yourself as kind of neglecting your duties if you partner with someone. Quite the opposite. There's lots of them. There's two on the panel here now. There's some very capable people out there who can help you develop your business if you want to choose that route.
Vikram, David picked up on change and constantly being able to change and stuff like that. What's your thoughts on how retail businesses should, e-com businesses should, build that into their sort of strategy? Obviously, how do you work with clients in terms of making sure they're constantly flexible and ready for changes?
Yeah, I think this is where, like David added that headless element, where all the complex logic and all the complex parts of the server side part is all moved in a simpler or in a API side in one provider. And then you, as a retailer, you focus on the customer experience, where you can focus just on that rather than, building everything from ground zero yourself without even having an inherent technology stand or experience in there. So focus on the customer experience side and innovate on that side, and then bring rapid changes. And we've also had a very interesting case study, had a customer who before pandemic, they were a big B2B business into fashion. They were doing really good business. And as pandemic hit, their B2B completely evaporated, completely gone. So they transitioned, and thankfully, we had partnered with them just before COVID, and we turned them around during the COVID, and now they're doing a pretty good B2C business website. And now they're looking to reignite their B2B side of the business as well. And they've transitioned, and that transition hasn't been easy because the mindset of business was just not there from a B2C perspective. There were tons of learning on their side. We did a lot of education with them. This is not how you do that. This is not how you do that. And eventually they did, the whole team pretty much changed actually during the process, but now they're in a very good position. What they're delivering with a team of, let's say, 10 people, they were earlier having a team of almost 50, 60 people at the time. So this is what it has done.
So COVID really forced their arm effectively to take
Exactly.
B2C seriously.
Absolutely.
Right? Otherwise, it sounded like there could have been a challenge otherwise.
Yes,
Yeah.
it would definitely have been, but COVID pushed them and supported them, and they've now seen this side is looking really good for them.
It's really interesting because I think I've learned something already about from this discussion. It's like, obviously we've got two people here, technologists and stuff, but a lot of what you're saying is not a lot about the technology here. It's about the core business values and focus. Absolutely. And all that sort of stuff. And there's lots of solutions to, like as David says, to use technology here, which is quite interesting, really. Paul, I just want to move on to sort of costs now a little bit. I'm not after specific costs here because I imagine every client's different, all that sort of stuff. But if we can talk in general terms about what's high cost solutions, low cost solutions. Obviously, like I'm assuming when David was talking about partnering with people like Amazon and other third party marketplaces, I'm assuming is that cost more than actually going to Vikram or
no.
Was it just swings and roundabouts?
I think in the example of that, and it also goes back to David's point around the business sticking, I suppose, to what their business model is. So for Amazon, for instance, they have their technology. You're effectively, well, not renting, but enabling your business to work through their technology. So actually, your development technology costs are near on zero, but you're giving up margin. So that is one model. The next model is, so we do a lot of work with Salesforce Commerce Cloud, for instance, and they run on a almost like a commission-based model where they will take a percentage of sales, but you get this huge enterprise solution with a license fee, with the license around it. So there's that side. Trying to build from the ground up, personally, and this is removing any sort of business head, I would not recommend to anybody because it's just too hard and there's too many good solutions out there now. So I always think people should stick to what they're good at, and there's a reason why somebody's built a Shopify, somebody's built a, in Vikram's case, BetterCommerce. So stick to what you're good at, and then that sort of relays into sort of the cost model as well. So if you're leveraging a lot of out of the box, I suppose, functionality, hardware, such as Shopify, for instance, then the actual cost to market is relatively low. But if Shopify doesn't answer all your business critical needs, then you might need to look at an alternative provider and customize it. So if we compare the analogy with buying a car, it's what I want in terms of the core model, but actually it doesn't go fast enough or it doesn't look right. Then you add these customizations on top of it to be the car that you want, and they cost additional on top of the core sort of model. So there's very much a different flavor for each business. And equally, if you're looking to leverage an out-of-the-box solution that sometimes doesn't work with things like legacy technology, so there's that need to plumb the two systems together. So in terms of costs, something simple, out of the box, leveraging little to no customization, SaaS-based platform, low entry to market, something that's heavily customized, costs a lot more. And I don't even think there's a point in saying there's a mid lower and top tier pricing model, because it depends on what you want. And it's say with building a house, you can build a 3-bedroom house or a 30-bedroom house. It goes back to the key question: what do you want? What do you need? And what's the commercial model within that? Because having a license-based model or a total ownership of a platform might work differently for each commercial model of a business. So it goes back to the original point of what's the business, right? What model works with that? What's the ownership that I want to work with? Do I want to be development? Do I want to develop the technology myself or use somebody else? So there's no definitive answer. It's speaking to the right people to advise and understanding your business on answering those core questions as well.
And I suppose if you come from a background where you are wholesale led or you're bricks and mortar led or whatever, and you want to build this side of the business, then perhaps maybe partnering with an Amazon, other third-party marketplaces are available, might be an easy way to start. But if you've got a big online following of customer, if you've got a huge customer base online, then you might want to work with a BetterCommerce or whatever it is. That's kind of what you're saying. It's just identifying where you're at then, effectively. It's
identifying where you're at, and the e-commerce website it's just a channel. It's one of many channels. You just need those channels to talk to each other. So the common issue that we've seen and faced over the last few years is that e-commerce has run faster than retail. So the retail systems are heavily legacy systems. And getting that to talk to the e-commerce platform, and the whole connotation of one view of the customer becomes quite interesting, because one can do so much more than the other. So you've just got to look at, as per channel, can the channels talk to each other effectively and deliver the whole customer experience, no matter whether that is Amazon, website, in-store, wholesale, and so on and so forth. It's just a channel.
And do all three of you, sorry, good, David,
I'll just add one more thing into the cost debate for the guys listening, because it's something that we constantly find businesses, retailers and brands undervalue. Indeed, they don't even think about it as an asset, and that's data. So the value of data is clearly what keeps some of the world's largest organizations with the valuations they have. But for you as a retailer or a brand, think about the value of your data, because in my first option, which is to outsource your business to someone like Amazon or one of those many providers, you are not going to be the owner of that data. You are not going to know who your customers are. They are going to market your products to their customers. So bear in mind, one of the factors when considering cost is that in that model, you no longer have customer data. You've effectively outsourced that operation to someone else. If you buy a monolithic stack or you build an API-driven headless world, then you clearly will have an asset that sits on your balance sheet called customer data. You'll use it for marketing, and it will appreciate the value of your business.
I suppose with sorry, go on, Vikram, were you going to add to that?
No, I completely agree with David, and Paul said a very interesting thing. And typically, whenever somebody asks, how much would it cost? Give me a ballpark figure. Everybody wants to know in the first call, how much would it cost? Give me a ballpark figure. I ask them one question again. How much does it cost to build a house? But the standard response is it depends. Then I tell them that's the exact same answer that I have for you. It depends, because building a website is literally like building a house. There are so many nuances and so many finishing touches that you need to specify a lot of stuff before it can be costed out.
Okay. And also, I suppose what we haven't really factored in here, because this isn't a marketing discussion, but obviously when you talk about your third-party marketplaces, your Amazons and stuff, I don't want to keep saying Amazon here, I'm sure they're getting enough leeway, but they obviously offer a marketing service as well, don't they? And obviously when you're building a platform yourself, you've obviously got to factor in the fact that you've got to do a chunk of marketing to build this data and stuff like that.
You're right, Dale. It's gone even further than that. So we did a piece of work right at the back end of last year for a major UK retailer who was considering an outsourcing, and we looked at a product called Ingenuity. Ingenuity is owned by a well-known company, and in fact, 80% of the customers who use that platform, it's a monolith platform, use Ingenuity as their merchant of choice. So if you as a customer are buying those products on their platform and you look at the T's and C's, you're not transacting with that brand. You're transacting with the merchant of record as Ingenuity. So in fact, what's happening is they are taking the customer's money. They are handling the customer service post-order. And what they're paying back to you as a brand is a fee. You get your commission paid to you from them. So you have no costs, you have no marketing, you have no nothing. You don't even have a checkout. You don't even have a bank account. What they do is they transact for you and send you a commission back to you. So, you know, and there are many, many shades of that operation that you could engage with, but you can make it really, really simple to the point that you don't do anything apart from just bank the commission.
And design and develop the product.
Well, sorry, on the channel side.
So we've got 10 minutes left to go. If there's any questions, let us know. We've got a hand up here. Hold on a second. Let me see what it is. So Petra, I'm just going to put you in live. So if you want to, hold on a second. Petra, can you turn your mic off? Can you hear us?
Yeah.
What's your question?
My question is, what do the panelists think about Etsy markets?
Etsy markets. I'd like to pick that up.
The Etsy market is a marketplace, is a fantastic marketplace.
Yeah.
I think it meets significant amount of customer needs. I think it's pretty solid technology and it's obviously hugely scalable. So I think from a technology perspective, it's delivering. From a brand's perspective, I think there are some features and functions that maybe are a little bit laggardly, but broadly, I don't have a bad word about it.
What do you sell, Petra?
I sell fabric cosmetic mask.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a
It's not just mask for COVID-19, but cosmetic products.
Okay. And do you have your own platform at the moment, or do you just sell on Etsy and other marketplaces?
I would like to using Etsy markets because I would like to buy my products globally.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment on Etsy markets or?
I think marketplaces in general.
I don't really like Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we remove the names such as Etsy and Amazon, it's marketplace. It's another channel.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting significant reach to customers that you don't have the budget to market to or have access to, then it's fantastic, but it will cost in terms of giving up margin. So it's another channel, and you need to work out whether that's a commercially viable channel in terms of marketplaces. But each channel has its purpose. So as David says, the technology is good. The awareness of Etsy is amazing. So marketplaces are a vital cog within the whole system.
I think the only thing I would suggest, Petra, just to think about in considering using Etsy is that you're in a marketplace with a specific kind of customer segment. You're in the craft, home, however you want to describe it, segment. And there's going to be a limit to how much scale you can achieve in that marketplace, depending upon the products that you're selling.
Wait a moment. Thank you so much. I have to go for lunch. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Petra. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all.
We've got another question here from Natalie. What plugins are available for websites to use these systems? I've just changed my website to e-commerce. Can you see that question? And we'll remove from Etsy. Do you get that question?
Yeah. What e-commerce site have you moved on to, Natalie?
Can you tell us what site, Natalie, that you've moved on to? Web.com?
Not even heard of that, to be honest.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, web.com is like Wix.
Oh, okay.
Almost like that.
Okay.
Like Wix.
What I was saying, Natalie, if you've got time afterwards, you're more than welcome to join us in the post meeting if you want to have a quick chat with our panelists. So maybe we can do that, because I've got a couple of questions before we wrap up this main session. So you're more than welcome to that, or you could you can email us and I can put you in touch with one of the panelists as well. So there's just a couple of points and a poll I want to do before we end. So I did want to touch on quickly about legacies. Sorry, beg your pardon. I want to touch on quickly about integrations. And I'm just going to come to you for that, Paul. Just quickly, a few common challenges in terms of integrations, a few bugbears, things that annoy you, whatever it might be.
I think it's knowledge from third parties that don't document things properly. But yeah, in terms of integrations, there's nothing that's not achievable. Always good to have the right people in the room. Legacy systems, it's likely that knowledge has dispersed over the years. That's the reality. It's likely that the systems have been customized over the years. So it's a case of working out the puzzle sometimes, but nothing that can't be overcome.
So if you're a client and you're looking to integrate lots of bits and bobs, make sure you get as much documentation, resources.
If possible.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We've got one more poll we want to put up. So we're just curious to know, after all of that conversation, Scarlett, if you're there, if you could pop the poll up for us. We just want to know, see how many people left to listen to us are thinking of replatforming in the next 3 to 6 months. So Scarlett, you're there, if you could pop that poll up for that'd be great. And I will ask my last question as well. Is that poll gone live yet? Here we go. So yeah, poll to considering replatform. If you guys are left in the room, if you just let us know how many of you are considering replatforming, and we'll publish that in a minute when we get some responses. But I'd also like to, my last question then is, I'd like to go all around the panel and just get your thoughts on the future of sort of e-commerce platforms, because obviously David said quite a few interesting things. How things are changing now. You've got people that are doing absolutely everything for you. And then you've got businesses that want to basically become sort of effectively technology people, I guess. So I might come to you, Vikram, first. So what does the future of sort of platform development look like for you?
I think, Dale, platform development is going to become more commoditized, as it is today. Like the headless is probably one step in that direction itself. And gradually, what's going to happen is pretty much all small parts are going to become, it's already happening in a lot of ways. Everything is becoming commoditized, being sold as a separate component. So you plug and replace, plug and play kind of different components depending upon what your use case is. And that will happen more and more, essentially. And speed, I think, is always going to be the biggest factor in terms of, the response times of the websites is always going to be the biggest factor from the business standpoint, I think.
Okay. David, what's the future look like for you?
I think I would say two things, Dale. I think the three camps I talked about, namely the marketplace and the monolith and the headless, those markets are rocketing. So there are more choices about marketplaces that are relevant for you to go and join. There are more monolithic options available to you. Shopify didn't exist a few years ago. It's brand new. And there are 16 versions of Shopify out there you can go and take right now. And as Vikram said, the headless world is evolving. So I think there's growth in all those sectors. That means there's something out there that's relevant to you. But my second point is that the customer is changing stuff very quickly. We're working with a client at the moment who has almost half of their UK business, which is sizable, done through an app.
Oh, wow.
We're going to see more business being done through apps. We're going to see more business being done through social media. We're going to see, as a result of that, far less of an appetite to go and build a website and more to be where customers want to be. Customers want to be where they are. So if you're on your phone, it's probably not a website, it's an app. Mm-hmm. If you're in social media, you don't want to have to come out of social media to go to shopping. You want to be able to shop the products you see and your friends share with you on social media. So that behavioral change is meaning that the solutions that are available for you as a business are far greater than they used to be. Namely, you had to have a website. You no longer necessarily need to have a website.
Okay. Fascinating. Paul, your final thoughts on the future?
A little bit similar to both Vikram and David, really. It's speed. Speed on how fast you can move as a business. but speed of emerging technologies as well. New developments in the market are going to become quicker and quicker and quicker. And that's the same throughout technology over the last 10 years. And yeah, to Vikram's point as well, we've seen so many technologies swallowed up by the bigger providers. That's been going on for over a decade. That will continue. So the next cool bit of kit will be acquired by Oracle, it'll be acquired by Salesforce, it'll be acquired by somebody else. But they will be replaced in the headless space by another emerging provider that can do something better with a quicker roadmap. And yeah, I think just don't lose sight of the business and its capabilities, because there is more choice than ever. And entry into the market isn't prohibitive, because you do have the choice no matter what the size and scale of the budget is. But everybody says technology first. Actually, get the business first and put that at the core. The technology will just be surrounding the business no matter what the solution is.
Thanks, Paul. We've just got one really interesting question at the end. We're kind of right out of time, David. Are you able to answer as quickly as a question here from Saxena? David, what you said about not necessarily having to have a website, does that apply to B2B as well as wholesale suppliers?
Well, there are people working in a B2B relationship using apps. There are people using, other vehicles to communicate B2B businesses. So I'm not saying you don't need a website. I'm saying there are many more choices available to you, depending upon who your customers are and how they choose to interact with you. It used to have to be a website because that was the only digital asset that was easy to achieve, that could act as a conduit between B2C or B2B. There are many more things now.
So, thank you. Sorry,
I think just as a good example to that, David, as well, is Nike, for instance. You get an email through, you click on a product, it doesn't send you through to the website, it sends you through to the app. So that, obviously Nike being one of the biggest players in the world, that is the behavior that works for their consumer. And I think that supports what Vikram's just said from answering Saxena. It depends on the customer's behaviour.
Fantastic. And that's a great point to end on. Actually, Saxena, if you have got a couple of minutes, you're more than welcome to join us. Scarlett, if you could pop in the link to the post-event networking thing. So here you go. If you want to join us, we can carry on this conversation for another 10, 15 minutes, and you can exchange contact details and all that sort of stuff. So Saxena, you're very welcome to join us, and any other of our audience who wants to join us for the next 10 to 15 minutes for a quick informal chat. We'll be in a Zoom meeting, so it'd be very good. It'd be good if you can put your camera on, or at the very least put your microphone on so you can join in our conversation. So there you go. The post is in the chat box. If you could just click on that, copy that now, because we're about to close the meeting down. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists for taking part into today's sessions, and I look forward to catching you all in the next minute or two in a Zoom meeting. So thank you very much, guys, and applause. I shall close the meeting down. Thanks, guys. See you soon.